Now, okay, we're streaming, we're live. Well, not really live, we're recording live and it'll pop online later on. So, we are dealing this week with Accelerate Chapter 2. It is, or actually, it's the first chapter after the introduction area. So, it's actually Chapter 1. But, anyways, this is week 2 of Accelerate. And the broad findings, we're sort of starting to introduce the research in general, and talking about some of the high level findings. And the first thing that we notice that we're going through this, probably the key point of the chapter, is unless our IT organizations work within a state of constant and continuous improvement, we're going to fall behind our competitors because they are actually doing these things. And this is one of the things that we're finding. So in the chapter, the authors, they define low performing organizations and high performing organizations in terms of their in terms of a number of metrics, and we'll talk about those in terms of things like how fast they deliver software, but also in terms of how well they meet their business goals, how profitable are they, what are their market shares and things. And so in the broad findings, and remember these notes are online and I'm just sort of reading them out to you, so you can actually go through this on your own if you want in the repository. But in the chapter, we're finding, in the broad findings, we're finding that high performing organizations will accelerate with the things that they do along the lines of they will deliver goods and services faster. They will engage with the market faster, meaning that if something is coming down the pipe, it's if you think about, when fidget spinners were cool, the high performing organizations would have a manufacturing arm spitting out fidget spinners while it was still on trend, whereas the other lower performers need a 6 month lead time. So what else? They will anticipate regulatory and compliance issues before they go live, so they are not stuck when changes happen to the business. And furthermore, they will also detect security risks and predict those sooner. They will come to terms sooner with broad economic changes within the wider system. They're just more nimble and able to respond. And so that's kind of what we mean by high performing organizations. And one of the things that's coming out of this research is that software and technology performance within these organizations is a key differentiator for the organizations in determining and in delivery of their value to the customers and stakeholders. So strategic use of technology explains revenue growth and productivity gains more than things like mergers and acquisitions, or it says entrepreneurship. I know what entrepreneurship is, I just don't know what it means exactly in this context, but it's probably like spinning up a new idea in short term. Actually, their software performance is more predictive of the quality of the organization's overall achievements than things like buying out a competitor or anything else along those lines. So these are apparently very strong findings. A strong link has been found between an organization's use of technology and their profitability. And as technologists ourselves, that I think that kind of makes a lot of sense because we can understand the way that computing systems help us scale our business by doing things many times faster, and at a volume that is much higher than anything that an individual human can perform. So in their research, now remember it's the State of DevOps survey, DevOps has emerged as a key differentiating factor between organizations. And so the answer to how we build secure, reliable, rapidly evolving, distributed systems at scale lies within DevOps. Our ability to deploy things through continuous integration, continuous delivery, lean practices, which we talk about later on in the, not yet, it's probably chapter 3 is where we start to talk about lean practices, and something called collaborative culture. And there are a number coming up later, probably next week, if I remember correctly, a number of points where we discuss a number of warnings about misusing this research or trying to adopt this research without having the type of underlying culture that can handle it. Things about if you want to measure, this is really interesting, and I'll say it again when it comes up in the notes, but I want to skip ahead to it because it was so cool, is if you are working within a culture of measurement, right, and not making your goals results in loss of bonus, or maybe you are at risk of losing your job. Well, time and again, we find that people start gaming the metrics. So if you, anyways, we talk about it later, but it's really cool to say that there is a psychological impact that negatively affects an organization's ability to perform if it is a culture of fear. And I think we could probably talk about larger organizations that are known to operate in sort of a fear-based mechanic, or that have these. Anyways, we'll talk about all of that later, I guess, or maybe we won't, because I don't want to get in trouble for saying things that are not cool and that I have actually no real insight into. So let's leave that alone. If I had an edit button here, I would take that all out. So DevOps in general is accelerating our ability to deploy technology. However, some of the findings are that organizations, and specifically executive and management teams, that should be on silent, but specifically executive and management teams overestimate their progress when compared to their competitors. And it makes a lot of sense. I can remember a story of a time where an organization I was working at had just come out with a Jenkins server, or a continuous deployment system, and everybody would sort of pat themselves on the back, that, said, we did it, we finally got this thing that automatically does stuff. But it's important to note that you can't just stop there. You have to keep going. Otherwise, your competitors reach that point, and then they keep investing, and they will surpass you over that time. So another thing about this, though, is if we talk to our executive teams and explain to them that there actually is quite a bit more room in our DevOps space to deliver more profit and more value, maybe we can secure the investment to increase our team sizes and actually get the investment, or team sizes, or just get the investment to get the time to work on these projects that we need to improve the pace of our organization overall, because it directly affects the bottom line of the business. Really interesting stuff. So the question comes up, how do we measure these things, and how do we know when we have achieved our goals and our milestones, and like, how do we know what we're doing and whether we're doing the right thing? And what we have to do, according to the research, is focus on capabilities and not, so we have to come up with, let's step back, we have to come up with sort of mental models for thinking about how do we live in this accelerate framework, how do we become the high performing organizations. And we say focus on the capabilities, but and not on maturity. And so these mental models of maturity are particularly flawed, and we'll talk about that. So a maturity model is, I would like to set up a continuous integration system, and once it's set up, I'm done because I've I've achieved final state. Whereas a capability focused mental model will say, okay, we've got our continuous integration together, but there are other pieces of this. We can maybe make it faster. We can still work on things to improve it. We can improve our ability to scale. Maybe we start talking about orchestration services. The key is that once you are making the investment, you don't make the investment and stop. You carry on including that investment as one of the costs of doing business. And the return on investment from employing engineers to do to find the holes in the business and patch them with technological solutions. That's where we as engineers and developers and technologists, we actually return far more. This is the term 10x engineer. I think in practice we return far more than, not really, but we return far more than we cost, at the very least, in many cases. So here's back to the idea of maturity models. Maturity models prescribe a one-size-fits-all solution across an entire organization. So if you're divided up into multiple teams, they're all using the same standardized deployment pipeline, whereas a capability model gives more autonomy to the teams such that they can decide which way they want to get their systems live. And maybe there are performance metrics or deployment requirements where they have to achieve certain minimum goals, but it's up to the teams to decide how they achieve those goals. So there were four differences between listed for these maturity models. So the third one is maturity models tend to measure what are known as vanity metrics. So if we have a certain tool that needs to be used across the organization, again, the one size fits all solution. So everybody's got to have this tool installed on their machine. Well, they're going to work on, or the maturity model says our metric is the percentage of employees who have this tool deployed, whereas a capability model focuses on the outcome, not even necessarily the usage of that tool, but the reason that they have that tool installed in the first place, like generating more memes in real time, or whatever. There's a difference between measuring outcomes and so-called vanity metrics. And so maturity models also focus on a static level of technological progress. So again, you get to this point and you stop, versus the capability model aims to remain competitive and aims to keep monitoring what is going on in the broader industry, what is going on, what are your competitors doing, and how can we stay ahead of them. And it's sort of again, it's this point that once we're making a DevOps investment, we have to keep making that investment. However, remember that the organizations who are good at DevOps are moving further and further ahead and in capturing more and more market share from their competitors versus the people who are not making this ongoing investment who are falling further and further behind. And so the investment is, at least from the findings, it is said to pay for itself. So the next thing we really talk about throughout the chapter is looking at something called evidence-based transformations to focus on these key capabilities. Remember from last week, there were 24 key capabilities, and we'll bring those up again at a later date. Maybe I should bring the notes up so that we can, let's see, bring the notes up so we can read those. Let's go here. We'll go bring the notes up from chapter 1. This is straight out of our cheat sheet. The 24 capabilities, continuous delivery capabilities. We have our loosely coupled architecture, empowered teams, customer feedback, value stream. Anyways, so we'll figure out. I'm looking forward to finding out what that one is. So back to week 2. So transformation in terms of the definition of transformation, and what we're talking about is, say we are one of the lower performing organizations or a medium performing organization, and we decide that we want to become the high performing organization. Well, anyone can do this. All you have to do is decide that you want to do it and move forward. And some of the things that do not matter, have not been found to matter in this space, is the age of the technology. So if you are working on a legacy system, that's not a differentiator versus high and low performing teams. Having separate teams for ops or development, or that has not been found to matter. Something called change approval boards has not been found to matter in terms of transformation, but it has been negatively correlated with deployment performance, which is said to be one of the metrics we need to deal with when we are dealing with team overall organizational performance. So change approval boards might be, I hope she goes, I hope the authors go into more detail about that, because it does, there are open questions around that. So let's take a moment. I'll go back to my desktop here and we'll zoom in on, give me a second here. We will, if I control and, no, how do you zoom on a stupid Firefox? Oh, so embarrassing. There we go. There, my mouse wheel just wasn't happy with us. Okay, so these are the study findings where DevOps is way more impactful than originally thought. Executives, again, underestimate the value of the DevOps that they have, or they underestimate the value that DevOps has remaining, how much gas is left in the tank. So high performing organizations are 46 times more frequent deployers, 440 times faster from committing to the main line into this code is hosted on live. If things go wrong, and they always, and they always do eventually, 170 times faster getting back to the last known good state of software, and 5 times lower change failure rate. So things are far more successful more of the time. They recover faster, they deploy faster. Everything is just faster. That's 20 minutes on chapter 1 of Accelerate. I am going to stop recording and we're going to record chapter 2 right away, back to back. And that's it. So this is this episode, and in the spirit of Accelerate, I'm just going to stop talking and we're going to start again on the next episode. Bye.